Alright, so the Giants may have made one of the biggest miscalculations ever. Meanwhile, A.J. Brown's ready to help make the case for Saquon Barkley. Plus the reason Howie Roseman's gamble could pay off and why to have confidence in Saquon long term. And despite being ranked near last in young, promising talent, I'll give you more than a few reasons to be optimistic, so let's talk about it. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So a big shout out to Pete Fowler for winning this Isaiah Rodgers jersey during the last giveaway, which I'll be shipping out this bad boy tomorrow. Of course, that white autographed Eagles helmet is up for grabs for any of the first 75,000 subscribers to the channel. So do me a favor and hit that sub button. And then let's start with Saquon Barkley, who ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said on SportsCenter that there's going to be no shortage of usage for Saquon Barkley this season. And that after talking to several executives around the league, they believe the 27-year-old is going to have a massive impact because he's never had the supporting cast like he does in Philly. Since, instead of the Giants' O-line, now he's got studs, all-pros, and a ton of other weapons around him. Plus, I've mentioned this in the past, but Saquon's about to benefit tremendously from Kellen Moore's scheme and various alignments to put the defenses in a bind. Which, okay, that shouldn't be that surprising. However, what is surprising is getting a behind-the-scenes look at just how poorly the GM miscalculated the whole Saquon free agency market.
Franchising and trading him, I don't think is realistic.
Are we positive that nobody's going to pay him that kind of money? There's nobody in the draft. There's no free agents, receivers they're either going to be going back to their team at $20 million.
I mean, who would you say would go sign up running back to that dollar amount?
A team anyone that has money to spend.
There's a lot of running backs in free agency.
Yeah, but are any potential difference makers really? After you watch this film?
Even if Saquon's number one on your board, do you imagine anyone's going to have such a gap between Saquon and Jacobs, Pollard, Henry, whoever else, that they're going to want him at $12 million a year or minus whatever we're willing to eat and send a draft pick?
Right, and then if we did, what would somebody realistically give up?
I just think all the teams that need a running back are going to look at Saquon. Do you feel good about eating $3 to $4 million for a fifth-round pick? I wouldn't.
I don't know. There's no guarantee we can trade him.
Maybe it shouldn't be surprising. After all, it is New York. We already knew that Giants owner John Mara never even offered Saquon, but it's just the extra footage of how and why they didn't offer him that makes it look worse. But hey, some people listen to good advice, and then there are others like Joe Shane who, do the opposite.
They were so convincing in their argument, they swung me.
Okay, even saying that though, who knows? Maybe it works out for him. After all, Shane and the Giants front office admitted they're going all in with Daniel Jones to determine whether or not he's the guy for the next 10 years or if it's time to move on. Of course, I'm with most of you, including ex-GM Michael Lombardi, who thinks a train wreck is coming, while also saying there was a stronghold that somewhere on some tape that is impossible to find, Daniel Jones played above the line, with head coach Brian Daboll and Shane believing that if Jones is healthy, then the G-men are going to be really good. Okay, so maybe they have a bigger issue than just taking bad advice.
Did I stutter? I'm blind.
The fact that Saquon clip even got out there is wild, which is why understandably there were several reactions to it, most notably A.J. Brown, with the Birds leader tweeting that the Saquon video fired him up even though it wasn't even about him, and saying, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get yours, fam. Look, I know we've already established the fact that AJ is one of the core leaders in the group, so it totally makes sense for him to say this. Yet still, it just gets me fired up hearing the guys rally around Saquon. And I'm just going to say it now, but our new giant killer is going to be pretty busy when we play them next season. Of course, for the pessimists out there, I get it. 27 is typically a turning point for running backs, and the second contracts very rarely work out. Plus, when you look at the fact that on average, runners have a positive rushing yards over expected during the rookie contract and then pretty much fall off after that, it's hard to argue against it. And like Ted Seth shared, backs generally start to regress after that rookie contract or at about the 1,500 total carries number. By the way, I'll save you time in looking it up, but Saquon is currently at 1,201 in terms of carries. So, if we're going to go based off that trend, then Saquon has one more year at best before a significant decline. However, let's not get carried away because that's just on average, and Saquon's anything but middle of the pack. Because while it may be unlikely, it's not unheard of for a back to improve after 1,500 carries. For example, take Marshawn Lynch, LaShawn McCoy, and Adrian Peterson. Beast Mode ended up making a Pro Bowl in 2013 as he eclipsed the 1,500 total carry number and then proceeded to top that in 2014 when he made the Pro Bowl again and ended as an All-Pro with a career-high 13 touchdowns. Obviously, he was a huge part of helping the Seahawks get to the Super Bowl, yet it still amazes me that Seattle didn't hand it off to Marshawn in this situation, but anyway, that's besides the point. The other guy I mentioned was LaShawn McCoy. And sure, we all know Shady was great, and no doubt one of the GOATs in Philly who was then inexplicably traded by that clown. As Shady went on to 3 straight Pro Bowls in Buffalo, while having one of his best statistical seasons ever in 2016, putting up a career-high 5.4 yards per carry average and running for over 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns. Just for the record, all of this occurred after 1,500 carries. And then you have the biggest unicorn of all in Adrian Peterson, who also ended up surpassing 1,500 carries and winning NFL Most Valuable Player, Offensive Player of the Year, and All-Pro honors while putting up 2,097 rushing yards on 6 yards per carry and 12 touchdowns. Oh yeah, All Day also won All-Pro honors in 2 other seasons after that while easily eclipsing 1,000 yards for the Vikings. And that's not even to mention his impressive couple seasons with Washington as well. Again, I get that these are outliers and not the normal, but like I just said, Saquon is not the norm. Plus, I'd argue that all of these guys came from much better situations than what Saquon was dealing with in New York. So give him the Jeff Stoutland-approved road graders to run behind and go ahead and tell your Giants friends to look out. Of course, I'm sure they'll be quick to reference former O-lineman Justin Pugh's comments about the recent NFL Sunday Ticket lawsuit, with the NFL likely being on the hook for $10+ billion in penalties, which could impact the Eagles' way of doing business. As Pugh said, this Sunday Ticket lawsuit could negatively impact the salary cap, and it would hurt teams that spend like the Eagles and Browns since they rely heavily on the cap increasing every year. I mean, that's a fair assessment. It could slightly affect things even like it did during the COVID situation. Because like Pugh pointed out, it's been long documented that Howie Roseman gets around the accounting aspect by adding extra years in contracts. So that they can then renegotiate once they get into the heavy cap years and just go cash heavy with bonuses and guarantees early. Yeah, let's be real, even a $10 billion hit is just a drop in the bucket to the NFL. Although sure, at the same time, it's a risky business. However, I'd rather be going all in and going all for broke than not. I don't know, are y'all really worried about this? I'll just say I'm definitely not worried about Kellen Moore's impact on the Eagles offense, which is becoming more and more evident every day. Since ESPN also reported that Nick Sirianni is trusting Kellen Moore big time to make it all work, by blending the principles of the past offense, the things that Jalen likes, the dual threat ability, play action, mix it with his own system, and sprinkle in something new for the offense that got stagnant and static late in the year, essentially asking him to just clean up the mess.
Since you're down here, it would be really great if you could just sort of
take care of the cockroach problem we've been having in here.
No, that's really not my job.
Obviously, that's a little tongue-in-cheek, but Kellen's going to define the Sirianni and Hurts era. Or at least that's what Bleeding Green Nation argues. Because no longer will Sirianni be running the offense, and Jalen is definitely going to be asked to deal with a ton more post-snap reads. Plus, Kellen Moore will undoubtedly have hot routes for QB1 and make life easier thanks to his use of motion and putting players in the best spots to take advantage of mismatches. Which is why, like I've talked about in the past, the fact that Kellen was able to take Dak Prescott to a 4,902 passing yard season with 30 touchdowns and a 65% completion percentage is promising. And then you take it a step further when Dak completed 69% of his passes the following year. Reminder, that was with not nearly as good of weapons as Jalen has this season. But okay, yes, I've said it a couple times, there's going to be growing pains, and I don't think it's realistic to expect perfection right out the gate. Plus, you gotta remember, there's going to be different changes and nuances and everything else to deal with, but just to see Kellen Moore's improvement of the numbers is really promising. And right, wrong, or indifferent, Dak and Jalen are about to be compared even more than before, especially with the Kellen Moore connection now. Yet I'm confident, and Jalen's got a lot more control of the outcomes, which is good. As opposed to Sirianni, who, yes, still has CEO duties, but won't be in the weeds as much and is on the hot seat. With NBC's Reuben Frank saying it's pretty clear if the Eagles don't win a playoff game this year, Sirianni's gone. Because like we've been talking about, the Eagles have real coordinators now, and they have unlimited talent on offense, they're younger and they're faster on defense, and they have a manageable schedule. So everything is in place for Sirianni to get this team to mid-January, which is why if he doesn't, then Jeffrey Lurie won't have much of a decision to make. Look, I think most of us are in the same boat for this one, but what's the bare minimum Sirianni has to do to keep his job? By the way, speaking of a fight for a job, the wide receiver 3 battle is an interesting one, with Dave Zangaro looking ahead to one of the biggest camp battles. Writing not only will a third receiver play quite a bit this season, but if either of the starters has to miss some time, the third guy would become a starter in their place. So while it might seem like a rich man problem, the wide receiver 3 position is pretty important. To which I would agree, but it seems like right now Parris Campbell has a pretty good lock on the spot, since he had the vast majority of reps during OTAs and has been getting in a lot of work with Jalen ahead of camp. Plus his prior connection to Sirianni and productivity compared to other guys on the roster naturally gives him a leg up. Although if we're going based off of pure speed, then perhaps John Ross will get a chance, after saying he's faster now than his 4.22 he ran in 2017, or at least more consistently fast. And he definitely turned heads, however the fact that he hasn't played a game since 2021 is a little concerning. The next option would be rookie Nolan Smith, who I'm really high on and eventually think he'll earn more reps, but in terms of having someone ready from day one, the Eagles could look elsewhere. Also, the other rookie option is Johnny Wilson, and even though he could be used occasionally in red zone packages, his size makes it seem unlikely he'd play a lot in the slot. Finally, the other receiver is Joseph Ngata, but he also feels like a guy on the outside instead of that versatility inside. I mean, overall, it's not the most shored-up position, which is why Zangaro says the Eagles could be looking to add someone else. As my continued favorite target would be looking at Houston to see how much John Metchie might cost for a trade. Because not only could Philly use him, but especially given the fact that the Birds ranked 29th in under 25 talent, it'd be nice to get a guy with his potential at just 23 years old. as ESPN rated the Eagles near dead last based on unknowns and players not having panned out. However, NFL.com doesn't necessarily feel the same way and is not sleeping on Jalen Carter putting on the all-breakout team. Citing his serious disruptive potential and now being in Vic Fangio's defense, the expectation is for him to blossom as a featured playmaker at the point of attack, even going as far to say there's a realistic possibility that the Breadman ends this year in the top 5 of interior defensive linemen when all is said and done. But that's not the only Philly dog getting the praise, with Slay being sure to point out Nolan Smith.
He looks a lot different this year. And one thing I can say about Nolan, ever since I met Nolan, he only know one speed. So he one of the guys you got to watch out for your own self because he hit teammates and everybody. So even in practice, man, he's the guy that's going to run to the ball from all coaches from the D-line, 10 yards. He not 10-yard guy. He more like I'm trying to see ball, get ball. So He gonna be a special year, man, for him this year, man. Especially after him running behind Hassan all year, I think it'll be very special.
Obviously, nothing is given and everything is earned, but it won't be for a lack of putting in the work, as Nolan was seen working with Colts edge Kwity Paye to get in some additional pass rushing tips. Reminder, this coming after working with Von Miller, Max Crosby, and others at the Pass Rush Summit. And Paye's a good one to get some tips from because he continued to have upward trend as a former first-round pick in 2021 where he registered 4.5 sacks his rookie season and then followed that up with 6 in 2022 and then a career high last year with 8.5 sacks. So yeah, good on Nolan to get in the lab and work on his craft, which is what Bryce Huff has also been doing recently, posting to Instagram of the workouts just in case anyone was worried about him not being ready for the season, because Agent Zero's got a lot to prove, even with that new contract. Anyway, I just love to see the work and the camaraderie the fellas have. And it's cool to see C.J. Gardner-Johnson hosting a football camp on July 16th while having Isaiah Rodgers and Andre Sam as coaches for the event as well. I mean, the vibes are just different, and we're 2 weeks away from training camp, so hit that like button, make sure to subscribe, and then stay tuned for the next giveaway. This has been the Philly Special.